And we're back. You're listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C show. Hey, man, don't forget to get a copy of my book. Tom Molyneux from Bondage, The Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold, and you can literally get a copy right now by visiting Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or you can even go to our website, www.billycboxing.com, and click on the book club section and get a signed copy. That's how that works. Or bump into me on the street. I usually carry a bunch with me, so don't worry about it. I'll have some. And while you're at it, don't forget, www.billycboxing.com. We put all the news that's fit to discuss and care about up on there. Not only on the front page, but check out boxing news, the latest boxing news section, and all the columns of all of our writers and contributors are up there. So if you're looking to get stuff that matters and not just all BS, check out www.billycboxing.com. Joining me right now is my man Daxx Khan. What's up, Dax?
Great weekend of action.
Yeah.
And most of all, Saturday, we have to give a great mention to my cousin Nuri Rosado and his bride Stephanie. They retied the knot on Saturday. Congratulations to them. So I'm in a great mood today. The family had a good week. We had a good week of action. What more can I say? You got a smile on my face for a Monday.
Well, good. That's good. You got 3 fights that we're going to be talking about right now, and we got another good weekend coming up of a lot of, I think, more competitive fights than kind of what we saw last week. So what are the 3 you're going to work on this week?
We're going to do the 2 WBA heavyweight title fights. We're going to do the Ruslan Chigayev and Lucas Brown fight for the regular WBA title. And, of course, we're going to do the showdown between Luis Ortiz and Tony Thompson for the interim heavyweight title. And also on that card, we're going to break down the Saddam Ali and Jesse Vargas fight for the vacant WBO welterweight title.
That fight actually is going to be an interesting fight, so I'm sure we're going to start off with that one. Jesse Vargas, sometimes, you don't know what to get with him, and Saddam Ali hasn't really been proven yet. It just seems, he's not faced anybody with the experience that Vargas has. At least I think Vargas has fought the tougher opposition. Tell me about this fight.
Yes, Vargas has fought the tougher opposition of the two. As a matter of fact, there is a little bit of a, 7 degrees of separation between the two. Jesse Vargas' lone loss came last June to Timothy Bradley, and Saddam Ali's best win is over Luis Abreu, who he stopped in 2014, and Abreu has only one other loss, and that was to Timothy Bradley. So, how that might play into fact there, but it is kind of interesting. They do have somebody in common.
Well, that's cool. That's something that works for these guys. But my thing with Jesse Vargas is sometimes he seems like his mind is somewhere outside of what's going on in front of him inside the ring.
Well, the reason why I think that's interesting is it gives guys, when they have some sort of common opponent or they have an opponent that they've either defeated or they've lost against, and they have that footage that's out there, they can pick up on stuff, whether, what they did with, in the case of, we'll say, Saddam Ali, his win over Abreu. Maybe Jesse Vargas can see something in there that, from Abreu's fight, where Ali capitalized, or, Ali can go again and, see something on there and kind of judge, exactly, what Jesse Vargas did wrong, and, if he kind of followed the same path that Abreu did, and his team can make, some sort of adjustments before the fight. So, whenever there's something in common, and it's, within the last couple of years, it's always an advantage if your team is behind there and they're looking at the footage, correctly.
Well, how do you see this fight going?
Jesse Vargas, again, he only has one loss. He has his biggest wins are over Antonio DeMarco and Khabib Al-Khadif. And again, the lone loss is Timothy Bradley. The pros on Jesse Vargas, he has a quality jab, and he keeps his opponents busy avoiding those shots rather than letting their hands go. He has good footwork, and he uses the ring rather well. He has a big heart. Jesse Vargas will actually, stand toe-to-toe and trade if he has to. He's willing to go to war. When on the offense, Vargas mixes his punches well, and he goes from the body to head, and he's well-rounded in all areas. Of course, the cons on Jesse Vargas is a lack of power, and at times he's going to lower his punch output even early in fights when he's fresh for no apparent reason. I don't know if maybe Jesse Vargas has a little bit of a focus issue. One of the biggest flaws is direction. Vargas always circles to the right. Even when using the ring to his advantage, Jesse Vargas will always go the same exact direction. So, it's easy to time a guy who's going to do the same thing repetitively. Saddam Ali, across from him, you brought up a great point. He really hasn't had a top-tier level of competition like Jesse Vargas. And again, remember, Jesse Vargas has also had a lot of experience being around the Mayweather gym. Saddam Ali's biggest win was that 9th-round TKO over Carlos Abreu. And his only other loss was to Timothy Bradley. Plus, Saddam Ali was a solid amateur career. He was on the 2008 U.S. Olympic team. He has quick feet. He throws in combinations, and that allow him to reset himself, and he turns his opponents. And when they turn, Saddam Ali's already letting his hands go, and it keeps him off balance. The cons on Ali is he leans in with his punches instead of using his distance, and he never gets maximum extension on his shots. He kind of smothers his punches, and he leaves himself open for counters, and he also takes away from his power. He leaps in looking to land a hard shot and catch his opponent off guard, but many times I've seen Saddam Ali leap in, Bill, and not throw a punch. He leaps in and leaps back out. If he goes in there against the right guy who has a little bit of power, he's going to catch him with that counter, and even if it's not a hard punch, Saddam Ali can find himself on his back just due to the momentum. But I'm going to have to go with the official pick here and say Saddam Ali because he's faster than Vargas, who doesn't have the punching power to capitalize on the offensive and defensive flaws of Saddam Ali.
Who you going with Ali?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Vargas doesn't have the punching power to capitalize on the offensive and defensive flaws of Ali. If Vargas was a little bit stronger and had a little bit more pop, I'd pick him by a wide, but I'd probably say about 90% sure that he'd beat Saddam Ali.
Well, I'm going against you, man. I'm going to take the dog in this one. I'm taking Jesse Vargas. I think you made a great point, and one of the reasons why I am picking Jesse Vargas in this fight is because he has been around the Mayweather gym, and I'm assuming that he has gotten plenty of sparring against fighters that have good movement, that can box, and try to do the Mayweather defense, which is staying out of harm's way, versus head movement and stuff like that. And I think that might play into Jesse Vargas's favor. So I'm picking Vargas, although I do think that this is a signature fight for both these fighters. So the winner, this is a big win for whoever gets out on top. So I'm going. Normally we're together, but I'm going against you on that one. The next fight,
it might sway my mind a little bit with what you said, because a thing about Jesse Vargas, unlike a lot of guys that go to the Mayweather gym, is they try to emulate Floyd a little bit too much. Jesse doesn't do that. Jesse has his own style. He doesn't try to do the shoulder roll. He doesn't try and do everything Floyd does, and that's a flaw that a lot of those guys that come out of the Mayweather gym, they're trying to be too much like Floyd Mayweather instead of themselves. And when you're around a lot of quality guys, especially a Floyd Mayweather, and you listen to any other tips that he gives you and you pick up on them, it's going to make you a better fighter overall, as long as you're being yourself. So Jesse Vargas, I just might have to go with Jesse Vargas on this one.
Listen, it's something I learned a long time ago, brother. Every time I've changed my mind, like at the last minute, like if I'm going with something, then all of a sudden, I change my mind. I never win, ever. I always. So that's why, like, going into this fight, going into these picks, before even hearing you try to sway me, I already know who I picked. I already picked my fighters. So I promised myself I'm not going to be swayed because every time I do, I come up on the losing end. So that's all I'm going to say to you. But it's up to you.
I debated it last night. I really debated it, and that's why I closed off that fight, when my official pick stating the power is the only thing with Jesse Vargas that makes me pick Saddam Ali. If he had a little bit more power, Saddam Ali would, leap in there, and Jesse Vargas would catch him with a counter because he's a great counter puncher, and Saddam Ali would end up on his back.
Yeah, well, I wish that the only thing I wish that Jesse Vargas had, which he'll need against Saddam Ali, is a little better defensive skill. He is kind of weak in defense. So it is going to be a good fight. It's going to be a competitive fight, but like I said, I'm going to go with Vargas on that one. But first heavyweight fight, which one are you going to pick first?
we're going to go pick the fight over in Russia. We're going to do the regular WBA heavyweight title bout, and that's going to be out of Grozny, Russia, between Ruslan Shigaev and Lucas Brown.
Okay.
Now, this fight, Bill, has had postponements. It's had cancellations for various reasons. It's finally going to happen. It's not the most significant bout, for reasons such as the quality of competition Lucas Brown has faced so far, and the fact that Ruslan Shigaev has, suffered so many issues, whether it's postponements and layoffs, or whether or not Ruslan Shigaev has that health issue with the hepatitis that pretty much keeps him from fighting in most countries. But one thing about this is I'm pretty sure we're going to have some sort of fireworks, and it's going to make it worth watching there alone. Plus, the fact that whoever wins this is going to somehow tie in with the next fight that we talk about. But first, Ruslan Shigaev, is a guy once, as you stated earlier in the show, thought of it as the next big thing in boxing. Nicknamed the White Tyson. Why? Because he's short, compact, like Mike Tyson. And he looked very dominant early in his career with wins over John Ruiz, Fres Kendo, Nikolai Bluev. Then, his only two losses came against the very best, which is Vladimir Klitschko and Alexander Povetkin. And at those times, there was also the suspicion of, again, the hepatitis, which is a big issue. The pros on him is compact, and he has a quality defense. Shigaev always keeps a tight guard, even on the inside. He rarely lets his hands down. And he's also active in fights in terms of punch output. Shigaev throws combinations. He uses his head movement, and surprisingly, for such a compact fighter, he's fairly mobile on his feet. And his chin is solid. It's one of the best in the division. Only Vladimir Klitschko was able to stop him, and that was a vintage Klitschko who's walking over everyone at heavyweight. The con on Shigaev is the lack of activity, has been stated by you, me, and Emily Harney before, and the top level of competition lately, and the injuries or health setbacks that continuously happen with him. It's got to affect his mind. If Ruslan is not injured or pulling out, his opponents are. I believe there's had 2 or 3 opponents, including Lucas Brown, over the last couple of years, who've had to pull back. When you're a 37-year-old fighter, these things can not only affect your physical performance, but your mental performance. What happens is guys go into training camps, and they end up having their opponents pull out, and they end up taking on another opponent, and when they take on these opponents, it's a last-minute sub. They go in there, they don't give it its all, because they go in there with this mindset that they don't want to lose all that money they spent in their camp. Everybody that was on the payroll wants to get paid. They just want to get it over finally, and when that happens, they get upset by lesser fighters, and it's hard to get yourself back on track. The guy across from him now, Lucas Brown, his best opponent to date is James Toney. Of course, this is a James Toney who had over 77 fights. Lucas Brown is a big, strong fighter with one-punch knockout power, and he's faster than most think of in terms of hand speed. The cons on Lucas Brown, pretty much everything. He has almost zero head movement and almost zero defense. 90% of the time, Bill, he walks around with his hands down. His footwork is poor. He rushes in to attack opponents with reckless abandon. The reason why he gets away with this is because of the level of competition he's had thus far. His chin is also questionable. James Toney actually dropped him down to a knee with a not-so-big punch. And again, this is a 44-year-old James Toney who had over 75 fights under him. Remember, James Toney made his debut as a middleweight in 1988. The official pick here is rather easy, even after the layoff, Ruslan Shigaev. In an era of supersized heavyweights, Shigaev at 5'11", he's a small guy in this era, but he's excelled against bigger men unless he's in really bad condition or his mind is not in the fight for the reasons I stated. I'm sure he's going to dominate this, and this might be his way to a comeback.
The way you said it, this might be his way to a comeback. I thought you were going to say something else, but I agree with you.
No. I was not going to give a Roy. I was not going to, wrap off the Roy Jones line. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years. I wasn't going to use any of that.
Well, I'm with you. I'm picking Shigaev. The age is a concern. The injuries are a concern, but for all the same reasons against Brown. I mean, and quite frankly, he's not as big as most of Shigaev's opponents. If you take a look at the opponents, Shigaev, if he's learned anything over the last half a dozen years, it's how to fight bigger guys. And I don't think Brown is as big as some of the opposition that Ruslan Shigaev has not only faced, but he's beaten. And like you mentioned,
5'11" in this era, Bill, you're a small heavyweight.
Right?
Remember, Mike Tyson used to be billed at 5'11", but you've met Mike. I've met Mike a lot of times. We've been to banquets, we've been to fights with him. Mike Tyson, he was not 5'11". Mike might be 5'10", and Shigaev, is built much like Tyson, not as fast, maybe not as explosive power, but he's learned to excel And the only difference between Mike and Shigaev really is, as Tyson was on his way out, the supersized era of heavyweights was just coming in.
Well, that's my point. I think that Shigaev has become proficient fighting bigger guys, and Lucas Brown, who's been kind of, protected, overprotected. Listen, if Brown beats Shigaev, it'll be the toughest fight of his career. I'm with you. I'm picking Shigaev. Finally, the last fight we're looking at here is Luis Ortiz against Tony the Tiger Thompson. How's that one going to go?
I love this fight because I'm a big fan of King Kong. Luis Ortiz, he's another guy. He's a big guy who's also an aging heavyweight. He hasn't had a lot of fights as some of these other ones have, but only bring that up real quick because you talk about Shigaev's age, but him, Lucas Brown, and Luis Ortiz are all about the same age, between 35 and 38. Luis Ortiz just scored the biggest win of his pro career last December at the Turning Stone where we were at. He stopped Brian Jennings. He has a solid amateur career from the Cuban system, though the rumors say he was not the hardest worker on the team, and of course there's the PED issues as a pro right now, but he seems to have a short list of willing opponents because of what he does inside the ring. His power is what people think about first, Bill, but the way he sets his opponents up to land the big shots is what is very impressive to me and what stands out most about Luis Ortiz. He's patient, he digs the body deep, and then he does his damage with the hook or uppercut. He's also a top-caliber counterpuncher, and he rarely wastes his punches. You don't see him swinging wild, and you don't see him missing a lot. With over 350 wins as an amateur, spending all those times in that Cuban system, he knows all the tricks. On the inside, Luis Ortiz might be, in fact, I do think he is the best in the heavyweight division right now. The cons on Luis Ortiz is a slow pace. He has never been past 7 rounds, and at the times he was 7, were really against obscure opponents. I've noticed and always wonder about that pace. Can he change gears if needed? He always gets his work done in a methodical fashion, but what happens when an opponent won't succumb to that power? And that PED issue always sticks in everybody's mind. It's going to take a lot to erase that because every time you see him in there and you see him dominate, you wonder, is this for real or is this enhanced? The guy across from him, of course, Tony Thompson. Who hasn't Tony Thompson fought? He's fought everyone in this era who's a name, and some of them he's fought twice. Thompson first made a name for himself in 2002 at the Thunderbox heavyweight tournament promoted by Cedric Kushner. Remember, he lost in the finals to Maurice Harris. That's something most people won't see on any of the resumes or on their official on their official records. And the pros with Tony, again, is the experience against who's who of the division. He's crafty. He knows how to survive. His power is underrated. He knows how to land sneaky shots, and the fact he's a southpaw has always been an advantage. Anyone who has ever underrated Tony Thompson has regretted it. The cons on him is he's an aged fighter who has wear and tear on him. He has all the experience in big fights, but your body can only take so much. You mentioned it earlier in the show today, the lack of speed. Even at his peak, he wasn't fast, and he's one-dimensional. Thompson is repetitive. He lays on the ropes too much. He uses the jab, then a 1-2 combination. After 3 or 4 of those, he lets loose a big left hand, hoping that, that's going to score a stoppage or slow his opponent down like he kind of did with David Price. But that's about it. Tony Thompson doesn't have much left in his career at this point in time. He hasn't had for quite a few years. My official pick is going to be Luis Ortiz, the real King Kong. This is a guy, Bill, who I believe has literally put fear in the division because of how relaxed he is when he gets the work done. And those who are not nervous before, they certainly have become nervous after the Brian Jennings fight.
I'm with you. I'm picking Ortiz as well. He impressed the hell out of me up at the Turning Stone against Jennings. I feel that he's the type of fighter that fights to his level of opposition, so we may see a slower pace. And I disagree with you. I think that he did fight a much quicker pace against Jennings. I think that that's indicative of what I'm saying in terms of him fighting up to his level of opposition. But I think we are going to see that slow down, take your time fighter again against Tony Thompson. It won't be a pretty fight, but I think that Ortiz will win. And like you had said earlier, he's running out of opposition because the way, everybody has to fight this one, has to fight that one. There's really no one left. I think Tony Thompson ended up being a better fight than his original opponent. So I'm with Ortiz with you.
Valid point. And as a matter of fact, last night it just happened to be, and not because I was breaking this fight down on the show today. I just happened to be flicking through the channels, about 1 o'clock in the morning, and that fight was on, the Jennings and Ortiz fight. And you did see exactly as you stated. There was times when he picked up his pace, but when he could, he slowed it down. And the only times he picked up his pace is when Brian Jennings made him pick up his pace. So I have to agree, he can fight or does fight to his level of competition. But what is again, the most impressive thing to me about Luis Ortiz is how calculated he is. He has that game plan, and he goes in there, and he's not going to be thrown out of his game. He's not going to be thrown off. If he has to pick up his pace, he will. But he has that, he has that game plan. He knows exactly what he's going to do. He knows the job in front of him. He has that experience behind him from that Cuban system, and so all of them around, added with that power, it's just Luis Ortiz is so impressive. I just wish he'd have come around 10 years ago or 11 years ago when he was 25 instead of 36.
Yeah, he's no spring chicken. Great job as usual, Dax. I want